Hi and welcome back again. In this video we'll be looking at the dative case. This is the role that nouns play when they, or other nominals, act like adverbs in the sentence. This is the last of the 5 jobs for nominals. The nominative case is the case for nominals that identify the clause's subject. The genitive modifies another nominal. The accusative identifies the direct object of the clause's verb. The vocative addresses someone directly. Now the dative modifies the verbal action. So while genitives generally identify nominal to nominal relationships, datives identify nominal to verb relationships. The dative singular endings are quite easy. For all declensions, the basic ending is just an iota. It gets a little bit more complicated when we add on the connecting vowels, though. When we add the omicron connecting vowel in the second declension masculine and neuter, what we end up with is the omicron lengthening to omega and the iota moving underneath as an iota subscript. Similarly, in the first declension, we end up with that iota moving underneath the connecting vowel, whether it's eta or alpha, as an iota subscript. In the third declension, on the other hand, the iota consistently stays at the end of the stem. So here are some dative singular examples. Lago, with that iota subscript in the second declension masculine. From paidiske and thura, we get paidiske and thura. Doesn't sound different because you don't pronounce the iota subscript. From teknon, we have tekno in the second declension neuter. In the third declension, from meter, we have metri. And notice that this is another one of the cases where that epsilon between the tau and the rho that appears sometimes, it collapses in the dative singular. So it's not meteri, it's metri. From polis, which has the real stem pole, we just add the iota on that stem and we have pole. From pneuma, which has the real stem pneumat, we have pneumati. And from genos, which has the real stem gene, we have gene. The dative plural endings across the board involve a sigma and an iota. In the second and first declension, the dative plural ending is is, iota sigma. In the third declension, you just reverse those two letters, and the ending is a sigma iota, sometimes preceded by an extra connecting vowel, which is unusual for third declension endings. In this case, often an alpha. When you add the second and first declension connecting vowels, you end up with the endings ois in the masculine, eis in the first declension feminine, and second declension neuter is ois, just like the masculine. And just like masculine and neuter nouns tend to share the same forms in the genitive case, so too in the dative case they tend to share the same forms. And the second declension masculine and neuters really only vary in the nominative and in the accusative, and sometimes the vocative. And the third declension ending is just this C ending, sometimes with an alpha before it. So here are some dative plural examples. Logos becomes logois. Paidiske becomes paidiskais. Teknon becomes teknois. Metrasi is from meter. Polesi is from polis. Pneumasi is from pneuma. And genesi is from genos. In all of those cases, you just add the C, or in the case of meter, the AC ending onto the stem of the noun. Just notice with pneuma that the tau at the end of the real stem has disappeared. Pneumat. Since pneumatsi is difficult to pronounce, final taus, when they meet that sigma of the dative plural ending, they often disappear. So instead of pneumatsi, we have pneumasi. So let's look at these case endings for the dative in the context of all of our other case endings. We have first the masculine second declension nouns, and we have logos and logu, and now logo, followed by logon as the accusative and loga. Below that, we have logoi, logon, and now the dative logois, followed by the accusative logus and the vocative logoi. In the feminine first declension, you can see paidiske with the iota subscript there, and you can see how similar those feminine first declension endings all look, just with an extra consonant or iota subscript here and there. Paidiske, paidiskes, paidiske with a subscript, paidiskane, and paidiske. And in the plural, tais paidiskais is the dative. In the neuter second declension, you can see again that while the nominative and accusative forms are different than the masculine second declension, the genitive is still to teknu, just like to logu, and the dative is to tekno with the subscript, just like the dative to logo. In the plural, again, we have tois teknois. We can now complete our chart of the basic third declension case endings. In the masculine and feminine, singular, nominative has no particular ending, genitive is os, dative is now e with the iota, the accusative is alpha, and the vocative is the same as the nominative or the real stem, but no particular ending. In the neuter, the forms are almost exactly the same in the singular, except that the neuter accusative singular is the same form as the neuter nominative singular. That same pattern in which the neuter uses the same form for nominative and accusative. In the plural, the masculine and feminine endings are s in the nominative, own in the genitive, c in the dative, sigma iota, as in the accusative, and s in the vocative. With neuter third declension nouns in the plural, the nominative ending is again alpha, a. The genitive and dative are the same as for masculine and feminine, own and c for the dative, and then the same ending that we saw in the nominative, alpha, shows up for the accusative and vocative forms of the neuter plural. So alpha in the nominative, alpha in the accusative, and alpha in the vocative. Just a reminder now that as we look at the various types of third declension nouns and the dative forms of them, as I keep saying, you don't have to memorize all of these forms. We're going through these as an exercise to remind you of the different ways that the third declension nouns can form their real stem, and also to show you a few of the quirks in certain types of third declension nouns when it comes to forming the dative. In the ampelone type, which just uses the nominative singular form as its real stem, the dative singular is ampeloni, just adding the iota onto the end. And in the plural, we have ampelones, ampelonon, and then ampelosi before the accusative ampelonas and vocative ampelones. Now, notice that the nu at the end of the real stem has disappeared in the dative plural. Instead of apelonsi, we just have apelosi. And that's basically for ease of pronunciation. It's common when you're adding an ending that begins with sigma for a nu before it to drop out. You just have to keep that in mind. With an irregular noun like gune, which produces the real stem gunaic, once again we just add the iota in the dative singular. So gune, gunaikos, and then in the dative gunaiki, accusative gunaika, and in the vocative this gunai form, dropping the kappa. In the plural, we have in the nominative gunaikes, genitive gunaikon, and now in the dative we have something else that happens with combining or disappearing letters. The dative plural of gune is gunaiksi. Notice that the kappa at the end of the real stem and the sigma of the dative plural ending have combined to make one letter, a xi. And that'll happen fairly consistently if that C ending comes up against a final kappa. But then the accusative forms, if you remember, are gunaikos and gunaikes. With the meter type, which shortens that eta in front of the final row for its real stem pater, the dative singular is patri. Now notice that just like the genitive singular, in these forms, for pronunciation purposes, the short epsilon has dropped out of the real stem. So it's not pateri, it's patri. In the dative plural, similarly, that epsilon drops out, and we have patrasi. Now, in this kind of meter type noun, you'll notice that there's an extra alpha that's added to the ending, almost like a connecting vowel, which again is for the purposes of pronunciation. Following a row like that, it'd be impossible to just have row sigma, but if you add the alpha in front, that makes it pronounceable, patrasi. In the pneuma type, though, we have a neuter third declension noun formed in its real stem by adding tau onto the nominative singular, pneumat. And so the dative form is pneumati, just adding the iota, and the dative plural is pneumasi. Now notice again, the last letter of the real stem, that tau, has disappeared. It's been absorbed by the sigma. Again, because pneumatsi is kind of hard to pronounce, and so it becomes smoothed out to just pneumasi. With the Peis type, remember again that the sigma drops off and is replaced by a delta, a different consonant, at the end of the real stem. So we have in the nominative Peis, in the genitive paidos, and in the dative paidi. Again, just adding the iota ending onto the real stem. In the plural, though, dative plural is paisi. Again, just like with the tau in pneumata, the delta in paides gets dropped off when it runs into the sigma of the C dative plural ending, because paidsi would be difficult to pronounce. So it's just paisi. In the polis type, the dative singular is paulei, and that's easy to remember if you keep in mind that the real stem of polis is paule, with an epsilon on the end. So all we're doing there is putting an iota on the end of the real stem. And the dative plural is paulesi. Again, actually totally regular, just putting the C ending on after the epsilon of the paule real stem. With the Hiereus type, similarly, the dative singular is antiocheti, because the real stem ends in an epsilon. And the dative plural is a little bit unusual, because the upsilon that was in the nominative and vocative singular, Antiochus and Antiochu, that upsilon reappears for some reason in the dative plural, and instead of Antiochesi, we have Antiochusi, epsilon, upsilon, sigma, iota. But with the genos type, with the real stem gene, we have the dative singular form gene, epsilon iota, and in the plural, just like with the polis type, we have genesi, the real stem plus the C ending. Finally, in the ichthus type, we have ichthui for the dative singular, adding the iota onto the ichthu real stem. And in the dative plural, ichthusi, again, just adding the regular dative plural ending. But what does it really mean? We said earlier that it allows a noun or a nominal to modify the sense of the verb in the sentence, or at least the verbal idea in the sentence. But like the genitive case, the dative case plays several common roles. Several kinds of nominal verb relationship can be communicated this way. So one of these relationships is when the dative nominal identifies the indirect object of the verb, where something or someone other than the direct object receives the action. And in English, we often use the helper word to, at least as a first stab at this kind of indirect object dative. For example, we have the sentence poleo te gunaiki tus ichthuas. I usually sell poleo, fish, tus ichthuas, to the woman, te gunaiki. Or toptoko do tauta denaria. Give do these denarii tauta tai denaria to the poor man, toptoko. A different nominal verb relationship is the dative of interest. This is where the dative identifies someone who benefits or suffers from the verb's action. Not just receiving the action, but the action either is to their advantage or to their disadvantage. This is not the direct object, not even the indirect object, but it still has an interest in the action. And the helper word that we can use to start with when we're translating is for. So, ha pater ton ieson didoi hemin. The Father, ha pater, is offering, didoi, Jesus, ton iesun, for us, hemin. Hence the expression ta emoi, which means the things for me, or the things I have an interest in, which is often translated my affairs, or the things that concern me. With the dative of place, the dative nominal identifies the place in which the action of the verb happens, or the location toward which the action is directed. And we have helper words in or to that are often used in English translation. So we have the sentence, agoradze Maria te agora. Maria is shopping te agora, in the market. Stephanos te gymnasio bine. Stephanos usually goes to gymnasio, to the gymnasium. With the dative of accompaniment, the dative nominal is identifying the person whom the subject or object is with. And the helper word to start here, not surprisingly, is often with when we're translating. So, bino foibe means I am about to go, or I usually go, or I am going. Foibe, with Phoebe. With the dative of time, the dative nominal identifies the time when the action takes place. This can be the specific moment at which the action happens, or a period of time during which the action happens. And the helper words here are in or at. With the sentence, Pole Alexandros to proi, we might translate this, Alexander begins to sell in the early morning, to proi. We also have the dative of instrument or means. Here the dative nominal identifies the instrument or the means with which the verb's action is carried out, and the helper word here again is often with. So Maria symposion poie arto kai oino. Maria is preparing a dinner party, arto with bread, and oino with wine. Or phoebe trisi denarios skuon agoradze. Phoebe usually buys a jug, trisi denarios, for 3 denarii. We could say she buys a jug with 3 denarii or using 3 denarii, but often what you want to do is find the most idiomatic English expression and not be too firmly wedded to those helper words. So here in English, when we talk about using a certain amount of money to buy something, we don't say with 3 denarii, we would say for 3 denarii. In the dative of context or sphere, the dative nominal identifies the context or sphere in which the clause is to be understood. That sounds a little bit abstract. It's also sometimes called the dative of respect, and it might help to think of the dative nominal here identifying the thing or the reality with respect to which, or in relation to which, the sentence is true, the action of the sentence takes place. The helper words to start here are in the context of or in relation to. And so Alexandros kalos te polese. Alexander is skillful. There's a verbless clause, but he's not skillful all the time. His being skillful is only te polese, in relation to selling, or we might say when it comes to selling. Similarly, te pole hemon dunatos Simon. Simon is the subject. He is powerful. This is another verbless clause. He is powerful te pole, in relation to or in the context of the city. And which city? Te pole hemon, our city. But he might not be powerful in the context of another city or in the context of the countryside. Here's a summary then of the dative uses we've talked about. This isn't exhaustive, but this gives you a good sense of some of the most common kinds of noun-verb relationships that can be identified with the dative. The indirect object using to, interest with the helper word for, accompaniment with the helper word with, time and place both use the helper words in or at, instrument or means again uses the helper word with, and context or sphere we might use helping expressions like in the context of or in relation to. And so it might help for you to remember this list of possible helper words for the dative: to, for, with, in, at, in the context of. Before we leave the dative, we just want to glance at a few other pronouns and take note of the dative forms in these pronouns that we've already become familiar with. So if we look at the case endings now for tis and include the dative, you can see that the real stem teen is still there in the dative singular, and in both the masculine, feminine, and the neuter forms, we just have tini with that iota added on. Similarly, we have the C ending in the dative plural, but notice here too, the nun disappears, the nu disappears before the sigma. Forgot for a moment there what language I was working with. Nun is Hebrew. The nu disappears before the sigma, and we have, instead of teen C, we just have tc, which again is easier to pronounce. With the first and second person personal pronouns, The dative forms are actually a little bit unusual. With the singular pronouns ego and su, the dative ending is oi, omicron iota. So the dative form of ego is moi or emoi, and the dative form of su is soi. That can look hard to remember. It might be a little bit easier if you keep in mind that the regular second declension dative ending is omega with that iota subscript. So an O-class vowel with iota subscript. This oi ending is related to that one. Instead of the iota having moved under the O-class vowel, it's right up there beside, but you've still got an iota there. And the vowel is still an O-class vowel, even though it's the short one, omicron. So the oi ending really is sort of a variant on the regular dative singular O ending with that iota subscript. In the plural, here again, this is the one place where hemes and humes have irregular endings. So the dative of hemes doesn't use the C or seen ending that's usual in the third declension. Instead, we have hemin with iota nu, and the dative plural of humes, to you or for you, is humin, again with that iota nu ending. In the case of pas, pasa, pan, things are fairly regular in the dative. In the singular, if we remember that the masculine and neuter stem is pant, then we're not surprised by the panti in each case. In the feminine, the stem becomes pas, and so we have passe with the iota subscript. In the plural, the stem in all three cases becomes pas. This is because the pant stem in the masculine and neuter collapses when it runs into the sigma. Nun tau sigma is a difficult combination to pronounce. So the masculine and neuter dative plural is just passi instead of pantsi. But the feminine dative plural is quite regular, passais. In the case of Paulus, things are even more regular. In the dative singular, we have masculine paulo and feminine paule and neuter paulo, all with the iota subscript. And in the dative plural, we have paulois, paulais, and paulois. Similarly with megas, in the dative singular, we have megalo, megale, megalo. And in the plural, megalois, megalais, megalois. Totally regular. You can learn more about Greek cases and the dative case in particular in Mounce's Basics of Biblical Greek, and I've given you the section and page numbers for the 3rd edition, and Wallace's Basics of New Testament Syntax, and I've given you the reference for the Dative Case chapter in his 1st edition.